Politics Bureau. I'm Stuart Thompson, the Bureau Chief here, and I'm joined by Aaron Woodrick, the Director of the Domestic Policy Program at Macdonald-Laurier Institute. And Aaron, you're going to help us deal with the government's online harms bill, which is designed to crack down on harmful content on the internet. First of all, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
First, I think we should talk about the reaction to this bill, because at the Post in this bureau, we were expecting a more controversial bill. It's not without its critics, but it seems like maybe the critics are less fired up than we expected. Is that your read on this?
Yeah, I mean, let's remember this is not the first kick at the can with this. There's been several iterations of this bill, a lot of criticism, including from people that they probably expected to hear praise from. So I think that's reflected in this bill, and I think they deserve credit for that. They've recognized that there was a sort of across the spectrum concerns about their previous efforts, and they've got rid of most of the excesses of those concerns in this version of the bill.
Okay, let's just talk about a really fundamental question here. A lot of this stuff, harmful content on the internet, a lot of it's already illegal.
Yeah.
Do you think that this bill should exist? Do we need this? Does the nature of the internet necessitate a bill like this?
Yeah, I mean, that's the valid question, right? People suggest that the laws we have already, I mean, we talk a lot about free speech, for example. There are already restrictions on free speech. They're well established in law, things like libel, things like incitement to violence. You're not allowed to say those things without consequence. The question is whether the introduction to the internet and sort of the digital expression requires new restrictions on free speech. I'm not convinced that there are, but there's a case that some people make for that. And what's interesting about this bill is, as you say, there are a lot of things in this bill that it claims to be cracking down on, which are already illegal. They're already in the criminal code. And in a way, this bill tries to do a couple of different things. There is the angle that's trying to protect children. There's stuff about, for example, sexual content or intimate images that are not consensual, bullying. So there's a sort of child protection element here. Again, a lot of this stuff is already illegal, but that's one part of the bill. And then the other part is really about hate writ large, this idea of fomenting hate, this idea of spreading hate. And that's where I think this bill starts to run into some serious trouble and ambiguity, and especially when it comes to kicking that stuff over to human rights commissions and tribunals.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. Harmful content defined by this bill is something that incites violence, something that incites terrorism, bullies a child, sexually victimizes a child, induces a child to harm themselves, is intimate content without consent posted on the internet, or that foments hatred. Now,
Yes.
I know you were a little spooked by that last one. Can you explain why?
Yeah, I mean, so first let's take the six that are fine, right? The first two in terms of inciting violence, inciting terrorism, these are already criminal acts. These are already well-established restrictions, nothing new here. The other four are with regard to children and children's protection. So again, 6 of those 7, I think most people can probably agree on. Fomenting hate, though, very, very tricky, very ambiguous. The definition that they include, because they do include a definition that they want to amend in the criminal code, it says something like, it has to be stronger than dislike or disdain, but again, very ambiguous what that means. It also has an exception saying that just because something belittles or mocks or this kind of language, that doesn't necessarily mean it meets the definition. So a lot of subjective words here, and the concern is that if, for example, we're going to make platforms responsible or liable for this, or individuals even, people are going to, if they don't know where that line is, there's going to be this tendency to self-censor and to err on the side of not saying anything at all. Some people think that's great. There'll be less sort of harmful content, but now you're chilling expression writ large. And I still think freedom of expression matters in this country. And we should be concerned about rules that are ambiguous or overbroad.
Yeah. So you talked about the human rights commissions.
Yes.
That's something I think that will definitely spook a lot of conservatives out there. We used to have these. In 2013, it was removed, Section 13 of the Human Rights Act. So I guess the question is, if you were around, I think you and I are about the same age. We remember when Maclean's was hauled in front of one of these commissions. Ezra Levant, was brought in front of them several times. I think conservatives at the time felt like they were being targeted by these commissions. Do you think that because there's a higher bar now for hate in this bill, do you think those concerns are gone, or do you think that we're likely to see those again?
I think if you want to give the government the benefit of the doubt, this is a good faith attempt to avoid the repeat of that exercise and to make the threshold higher. I'm not sure that's going to make much of a difference. The fundamental challenge with some of these tribunals is that they are, for lack of a better word, kangaroo courts. I mean, the difference that a lot of people may not appreciate between some of these tribunals and courts is that courts have clear rules. They have rules of evidence. You have to prove things. You have a right to know who your accuser is. None of these things apply with tribunals. They're kind of this weird halfway space where they're meant to deal with issues that governments know they can't pass laws or criminalize them, but there's also something kind of icky or not good, so we want to have this forum where people can bring their concerns. I see it almost seems like a political attempt to reconcile what they know they can't make illegal, but that they don't just want to shrug off and signal to people is no big deal. And a lot of the nasty stuff that happens on the internet falls under this. But I just worry that they're opening the door, especially by allowing easier right of action and by allowing these tribunals to offer cost awards. They're going to be effectively incentivizing complaints. And I think they may be surprised. They may get an absolute tsunami of complaints that just are going to open up a whole bunch of other can of worms.
Can you talk about the societal effect of this? I mean, it creates a bunch of new referees for people to complain to. And as a writer, I think that's something that worries me, even as a news reporter. I think for a lot of our columnists, they're concerned about this stuff. Yeah. But do you think that, instead of hashing these things out in the public forum, we're going to authorities now more than just having the actual debate?
Yeah, I think it could backfire badly, right? I understand the sentiment that a lot of people have is they kind of want to sanitize public spaces because it's uncomfortable and it's ugly. My response to a lot of that is that you're kidding yourself if you think that you can stamp this stuff out. People will find ways to express it. If they can't express it in the public square, sometimes they'll go express it in dark corners where there's no one there to argue against them. I think that's even more dangerous. I think a lot of this comes down to self-restraint. I think, parts of this bill, for example, asking platforms to, act, responsibly and make best efforts and things. I think that's all reasonable. It's when we get into, if you think of how tense and hostile some debates get on the internet, you're essentially handing a new weapon to people that are upset to say, oh, well, I'm going to get you now, right? One of the downsides to legal process being expensive is that if you need to defend yourself, it costs money. But one of the benefits is it deters people from abusing the system, right? And if you're gonna create a system that invites people at the first sign of any trouble to complain, I think you may suddenly find yourself overwhelmed with complaints.
Okay, well, that's all we have time for today, but I'm sure we'll keep talking about this. Aaron, thanks for coming. Thanks for watching, and